And I'm just going to race through these slides again just to refresh your memory real quick. And then we're going to have Matt come up, and he's going to give some very practical information on budgeting and cash flow issues. And for some of you, maybe you're in good stead on how you handle your money and your cash flow and your budget. If it's anything like the practice that we have and the people that come in to see us, that is not true. And most people, they need a checkup. They need help. I don't know if they can say that, but it's kind of like going to a doctor and the doctor pulls up the x-ray and says, whoa, we don't want to talk about that. You go, Doc, what was that? What was on the x-ray? Well, no, we'll talk about it another time. No, Doc, what was on the x-ray? See, if it's something that can be fixed or attended to or addressed, you want it addressed right away. You don't want to bury that. And we talk about that in church, I think, every Sunday. That's a very strong message. You don't want to wait till the last hour. Maybe there won't be that last chance for you. Okay, so we're going to talk about money management and budgeting. And then we've got a very unique opportunity. The last 10 minutes, I've asked Joe from our office to come. His background is very unique. It's from a counseling, almost a pastoral type background, a counseling background. And we understand that the real key in working with people is understanding their values, their passions, their dreams, but their values, what's really important, and then trying to connect the money and the money resources to their values. That's what counts. Their relationship with their spouse, their health, their relationship with their kids, maybe travel and enjoying things. The money is strictly a tool. So Joe's going to come up and cover that for a couple minutes and some very, very fascinating exercises as people go through different stages of their life, the transitions of those stages and how money impacts that. And then I'm just going to come back and wrap things up. So, quickly, review from the first week. We talked about check this. There we go. That was good. All right. Thanks, Mike. So, we still good? Okay. Well, if you've got it, that's fine. Go to page 4. Good. That's easier. Purpose was simply to educate with biblical truth. Wouldn't it be great if every key area of our life we can just totally, firmly ground in biblical truth? And that's what we're trying to do with the financial stuff tonight. Thanks, John. Then another key thing we had, on the money thing, I know I missed one of them last week. My wife told me. I got totally critiqued when I went home last week. So. But true or false? Money is the root of all evil. No. That's exactly right. It's false. It's the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. The love of anything is the start of all kinds of trouble. So we talked about this one, the 4 hearts, heart, health, habits, and hope. And I actually passed out a piece of paper. Some of you might have it. If you don't have it, if you put up your hand, we'll get one to you. We've got extra copies. If you haven't completed the exercise, do the exercise. Create your slices of the pie, because Matt's going to reference that. But it's talking about live, give, grow. Live, keep your hands up because they're getting them out there. Live, give, grow. It's really the 4 key areas of how you can spend money in your life. You can spend it on living, which is electric bills, and it is real estate taxes, and it's clothing, and it's food, and it's gas in the car, and it's car insurance and homeowners insurance, and it's repairs on the roof, and that's the living part. Give, we know what the giving part is. Grow, it would seem intuitive that growing is saving money and growing it for a future use. We've got a couple more up here, Steve and Dave. And so live, give, owe, grow. Owe is what you owe in debt service. And owe is what you owe in your taxes. It's a little different form of debt. Your taxes, you owe it to Caesar. Live, give, owe, grow. And Matt's really going to hone in on those 4 slices because what we wanted you to do was to fill out the slices of the pie, take a look at the reality of how you spend your money, and then compare it to how you would want to spend your money. I'll give you a real simple example. Let's say your giving is 3% of your pie, and your saving is 4% of your pie. And you think that through very carefully, and you say, wow, I wish my giving was 10 or 12% of the pie, and wow, I wish my saving for the future in college and retirement was 10 or 12% of the pie. Well, that's 25% of the pie that's what I wish it looked like, but what does it look like in reality? 7% of the pie. Do you realize there's solutions to that? Do you realize there are professionals that can help you execute that? And it's very difficult generally for people to do it on their own. It is very difficult. I've watched it for 21 years, how hard it is for people to make that happen. Okay, so we talked about the 4 H's and the live, give, owe, grow, and you can put your hand down now because I know it's going to get too tired. It's been up a while, and we're going to get one of those to you. So we talked about the pie and the slivers. We talked about some fundamental principles. God owns everything. It kind of changes your life when, from a financial perspective, you really can internalize God owns everything. We are stewards. Stewards infers we don't own it. Fiduciary means we're caring for it for some other owner. That's what a fiduciary, a trustee, a steward. They're great and fascinating words in the financial community, especially for a Christian, because implicitly, if you buy into that, it says, I don't own it. I'm taking care of it for someone else, and I'm responsible for it. I am responsible. We also talked last week about, I was trying to distinguish between soft assets and hard assets. Hard assets are pretty clear. You know, your car and your property you own and the money in the bank or how you invest it, or hard assets. Soft assets, your time, your talents, your control over groups of people or in your family, your influence, your authority. Do you think someday you will be accountable to that? Do you think you're a steward of that? Yes, I think you're a steward of that too. We talked about words like contentment and having confidence financially in decision-making, and generosity, which is such a wonderful experience, attribute, habit. We talked about the simple financial concept of a budget. It seems simple. Where it gets tricky is where there are non-recurring items in a budget. What's a non-recurring item? Well, electricity bills are a recurring item every month. And your mortgage is a recurring item every month. Your car payment is a recurring item every month, generally. What's a non-recurring item? Vacation. Oh yeah, we like spending $3,600 a year on all of our vacation travel with our family each year. Great. When do you do that? 2 weeks in the summer. Great. Are you putting aside $300 a month? You don't spend the $3,600, ignore it, and then load it on the credit card. That is not financial management. That is not cash flow. I could be talking to the corporate world or the personal world. Everyone that is responsible and accountable escrows for what they know they're going to end up spending. We talked about maintaining a buffer or a cushion. Why? Unexpected happens. You ever run a busy day and have a loaded to-do schedule and all of a sudden you get interrupted all the time? And when people interrupt or something comes up and you haven't seen anyone in 12 years or they want to talk to you, you look at it as an interruption. Maybe God put that person in your path, and the problem was you didn't create enough cushion in your life, in your time budget, to allow that to happen. We all do that. And I'm a horrible culprit of that, and I have really addressed it in the last 6 months to a year in my life. So budgeting for different things, but in money, you want to escrow and build in cushion. Be a saver. If you're not a saver, that means everything you spend is for a consumptive lifestyle. You're eating up all of it for consumption or debt service. If you're a saver, you're building a cushion and you're building for the future. Consider taxes. Can't forget Caesar. You can be thoughtful about it and you can be wise about it, and I'm going to share that at the very end. We want to be investors thoughtfully and patiently with money that should be invested. Should a young person, perfect example, should a young person right away going on their first job start investing in their 401k? No, of course not. You're not ready to be an investor. You've got to be a saver first. Build up a cushion, then you can become an investor. That's revolutionary. That's not what people are taught to do by the HR departments. Avoid misusing debt, especially when you misuse it to make a lifestyle bigger than you can afford. And protect your loved ones, the blessings God's entrusted you with. So those are some of the concepts. Okay, now I'm going to have Matt come up. He's going to run through a terrific exercise specifically on cash flow and budget management. Then Joe, and then I'll come back and wrap it up at the end. So here's Matt Shaw. Matt's my son, and he's probably just a tad smarter than me, I guess, at this point of the road. But you can be the judge of that tonight. All right.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dad. So, before I get going, there it is, on budgeting. Oh, the mic. Okay. The first question I want to know is, how many of you are really excited to talk about budgeting? I see 2 hands, but nobody else. So this proves my point. Nobody likes to do budgeting. And yet it's what we talk to all of our clients about. And yet we preach to them all that it's the foundation of your financial plan and how important it is for us to roll up our sleeves, to dig in, and to get to work on an effective budget. So what I'm going to talk to you tonight about is how to budget from a biblical perspective, why it's important, what you can gain from it, and why it's the foundation of your plan. So I was thinking, as I was listening to Scott, not paying attention to a word he was saying, about what would it be like if the IRS did not implement a payroll system for mandatory tax withholding for employees. How effective would the IRS be in collecting their tax revenue? Not very. They're already not very good at it. So it would make them miserable at it. It would be a disaster. And so one of the reasons clearly why they implemented that system is so they knew their tax revenues would be there. And that's exactly what we try to teach people. Imagine if all of your expenses were escrowed. Imagine if every expense you had or you could think of, the money was always being set aside so that it's there to pay every expense that we could think of. So that's a system. I'm going to talk to you about a system that we believe works. I've personally been doing it for over 5 years now. And I talked to another guy recently. He's been doing it 33 years. He said, I started doing this system 33 years ago, and we have not stopped doing it for 33 years, and it works. And I can tell you it works for me, and it worked for him, and I know it can work for others. So, budgeting should be done with intentionality. Budgeting should be, oh no. Those were all supposed to come out one at a time, but that's okay. Okay, so budgeting should be done with intentionality. We should be purposeful with the money that we're spending. Budgeting should be done with awareness. I think that's one of the key things when we go through a very mundane budgeting exercise with people, is how much awareness it brings. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the question, I just don't know where all our money goes. Where does our money go? Well, I have no idea. Well, let's find out. It's really not that hard. We'll just roll up our sleeves and dig in and figure out where it's all going, and we do. And it's an interesting reality that happens after they've gone through the exercise. At first, they don't want to do it. It's frightening. They think they're going to have to make too many changes. They're going to have to give up lifestyle. They're going to be too accountable. And they go through it, and they see where their money is going, and they see how they can make changes. They see where the changes can come from. So we want to be aware. We also want to be unified, husband and wife, household budget, money's coming in, money's going out. They should be on the same page. Exactly, with every expense. How much are we going to spend on this line item and this line item? Let's agree to it. Oh, but I make more money, so I should have more say. No, you should have equal say, and you should be in unification for where that money is going. Accountability. So accountability to one another. I think that a third party, it's always great to have that accountability. I use actually my dad as my accountability, my cash flow accountability partner as my advisor, but I would encourage you, if you don't have someone to hold you accountable, to have someone to do that. It's going to be a much more effective budget when you do so. You'll be much more successful. Transparency. So I've seen a lot of couples, husbands and wives, that they've got their money and this one has their money, and they're kind of running two separate cash flows in the household. And I think that can work, but I think what works a whole lot better is when they're on the same page and there's transparency in a budget. Budgeting should be done dynamically. So what I mean by that is budgets change, income changes, expense change. We may not be able to get to our ideal give, live, owe, grow percentages on day one. It may take some time to get to where we want to be. So it needs to be dynamic and it needs to be monitored. And that's what I think makes for a good budget. Okay, so phase one, how do we help people develop a budget? We need to identify income and expenses. So up on the screen here, you'll see a little spreadsheet, and this is a budget worksheet that we use, and that could be made available to all of you, either in our office with us, or we'll email it to you, or whatever you want. It's a spreadsheet, and we identify income. So in this example, Mark and Amy have about $120,000 of income. Mark, I think, makes $82,000, and Amy makes $38,000. And then we identified what is being withheld for taxes on their pay stub. One of the other things that I think is really interesting is to tell you how well escrowing taxes works. Meaning, when you're on payroll and you have taxes withheld, there's no pain. There's no pain at all. You're going to go through the whole year. You're going to pay your largest expense through tax withholding on your pay stub, and you won't even feel it. You won't even know that you just gave the IRS $35,000 over the course of the year. In fact, people are so blind to it, they say, I had a phenomenal tax year. I got $100 back this year. I paid $35,100 and they gave me $100 back. So that's how well it works, and that's how we want it to feel with all of the other expenses in your budget, right? We want it to be that comfortable with everything, just nice and smooth and easy, no stress when those non-recurring expenses come up. So anyway, phase one, identify expenses, identify income. This budget, as you can see, is pretty thorough. There's a lot of line items. You'll see different colors. Those colors are for different categories that we've created. or different. So, for example, your taxes could be the red category, and what do we have? The living expenses, or the bill paying is the yellow category. The home maintenance is orange, as you can see up there. Our daily living is green. Our discretionary is blue. Our savings is purple, and the gray is what's actually being withheld through pay stubs. So that's a 401k, that $500 you see there. So every single number, every expense is associated with a category or an envelope, as many of you have heard about the envelope system. I think it's a little antiquated because I don't know how many people are actually, getting their paycheck in cash and putting cash in envelopes these days, but there are ways that we've developed to help people implement digital envelopes using savings accounts and checking accounts. And if you're married, it could be joint checking and joint savings to attribute to the transparency part of all of this. Another interesting part about this is you will see, for example, a big one is maintenance improvements to your house. If you're a homeowner, those things will come up and bite you pretty quick out of nowhere. And we think there's maintenance items you're going to have every year. There's also unforeseen items. So if your house has $10,000 worth of appliances, I'm told that you have to replace those every 10 years. It's $83 a month. Every month needs to be going into that budget. So when your oven goes or your refrigerator goes, there's $1,500 sitting in my home maintenance account, and I've got the money to go buy that new fridge. Once I buy the fridge, I keep paying $83 a month to the next one. And it just grows in a savings account. So we know it can't be perfect, but we know that we can make an attempt to make things a little easier on your cash flow at home. So this is probably not so intuitive. We've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of household budgets that we've helped put together for people. You probably don't know how much you spend in some of these areas. Well, we can help you. Other people can help you. If you get together with your husband and wife and you fully think it through, you're probably going to get pretty close to a good budget, a good starting point. And so we get to our total expenses, and it tells us if we have a surplus or a deficit. Now, we've got a $2 deficit. We're pretty much breaking even on a monthly basis here. But what you'll see here is they have gross income of $10,000. They have $1,980 withheld for taxes, and they spend the rest. They spend $8,000 a month. Now, $1,000 of that was really their surplus in savings. We forced it to go into savings. I want to highlight one other thing here. Under charity and donations, we turned how much they want to give on an annual basis as a function of their income into a bill, into a monthly bill. So every single time they get paid, they know exactly how much to put into that bill pay account. And part of that amount is their charitable and their tithing so that they can give exactly what they set out to give at the beginning of the year. So when they come to church, they can write the check and it comes right out of their checking account. The money's there. They don't even have to think about it. It's already in there. It's pre-funded, just like how we pay the IRS. Okay. So once we go through this, we establish our baseline, right? We establish what our current spending patterns are. And we can then take a look at, well, how healthy is the budget? Is it healthy? Do you see room for areas of improvement? What are our percentages going to live, give, owe, grow? Are we shorting the giving? Are we shorting the growing? Probably. I would say that most people, when they go through this, pretty easily can find areas to cut expenses and beef up the other more important areas that they're missing in their budget. So that's phase one, identifying expenses and income accurately. Phase two, we probably want to make adjustments. In other words, it's not our ideal budget. We've been a little sloppy with this in the past. We want to get it right, okay? So where do people make adjustments? Well, we can reduce our lifestyle. There might not be room for that, but it's up to you. It's your decision. You're going to see it in black and white. You make the decision of what you want to cut. Maybe we want to reduce dining out, vacation. Car choice and home choice are interesting ones. I think that whether you finance a car or whether you get a 15-year or a 30-year mortgage or whether you pay for the car in cash or lease it, it doesn't matter, because from our perspective, driving a car or having a driver's license is the same thing as having to go feed yourself every month. No matter if you pay in cash, I think Scott mentioned this, you've got to refill the bucket to buy the next car in cash. So it doesn't matter. We don't care whether you finance, lease, or buy a car. The thing that we care about is the car that you're buying appropriate and affordable inside of your budget? Are we living outside of our means if we buy that car or finance that car or lease that car? Or is it within is it through the lens of a steward? Home choice, same thing. Could be a 15-year mortgage, 30-year mortgage. We have that debate all the time. It really comes down to, are we overbuying our house? Have we thought through all of the expenses that are associated with this house? Right? The electric, the taxes, all of the improvements that need to be done. There's a lot that goes along with that we don't think of when we go to buy a home. Okay, so we make adjustments and we agree to try to implement those adjustments, and now we need a system. I don't really know how most people, when there's two income earners, how are they making sure that all of their expenses are being paid? If each spouse is receiving their paycheck into their own checking account, how is the money then dispersed, and how are all of the expenses paid? I don't know. I don't think most people have a system. So I'm going to share with you the digital envelope and how it works. I think that having a system is a huge part of this puzzle. It's paramount, because if there's no system, how are we going to save effectively? Well, what if there's $100 left over in my account? I'm just going to go blow it. I'm going to go spend it, even though I should have put it into the refrigerator budget. Who wants to do that? Nobody. But that's what a system will do for you, okay? So the system, so what I want to highlight here is, in my first example, I showed all of the joint income, I showed all of the aggregate of the joint taxes, the joint expenses. Okay, well then we kind of have to break it out. Clearly, because of the disparity in incomes, Mark and Amy can't just simply split all of the expenses, because Amy will come up a little short. Mark is going to have to fund the bulk of these expenses. So I've got to know, what is Mark's net income? What is Amy's net income? What's being withheld from Mark's paycheck? What's being withheld from Amy's paycheck? How frequently are they paid? I'm converting everything into a monthly expense, and yet Mark is paid 26 times a year, and Amy is paid 24 times a year. So it gets a little complicated, right? How do we just simply snap our fingers and develop a good system when there's that type of complexity involved? So I don't want to fry your brains tonight, but it's really just simple math. It's a spreadsheet. It's pretty easy. The hard part is implementing the budget and sticking to it. But the cool thing about this, which I'll share with you in a moment, is there are some boundaries that are put in place on this budget. So it's almost like we can't overspend. Or if somebody overspends, the other spouse is going to know about it. And they're going to get to have a little conversation about that. So, okay, so you can see Mark has $5,500 of net income. Amy has $2,400 of net income. And then I go through the whole budget again, and we kind of have to shift some of the expenses more to Amy and some to Mark. So in this example, Amy does more of the grocery shopping. She's going to the grocery store more frequently. Amy needs to have more money in her daily living checking account than Mark because she's doing more of the daily living expenses. So here's kind of what we did. And again, I want to try to explain this clearly. It is a little complicated, but in my example, you can see the different envelopes and the color. So there's a joint checking account. There is a joint savings account. There's another, all of the ones below the checking account are savings accounts. They're all joint savings accounts. Those are your envelopes. And I know a couple banks that will allow you to create as many savings accounts as you want at no cost, no fee. So it's doable, right? The infrastructure is there to be able to do this. So they spend $8,000 a month, and we can see below the joint column how that breaks out. We're going to have to put $3,600 a month into our bill paying account. Between Mark and Amy, they've got to each come up with $3,600 a month to go in their joint checking account that is going to pay for all of the bills. They're going to put $1,000 a month into savings, their long-term savings account. They're going to put $543 into their discretionary account. They're going to put $350 into the home maintenance account. $1,565 goes for their daily living. That's essentially dining out, groceries, gas in the car, stuff you pay for on a daily basis. It's not a bill. You go swipe your card at the gas station and there you go. That's the daily living. It's when Amy goes to the grocery store and she swipes her card. So anyway, payroll items, you see $852. All of those expenses are now escrowed, just like our tax bill. Now here's another little tricky part to all of this is, well, how much do we put in the account? Well, every time each one gets paid, we tell them how much to put into the account, so long as this is the budget that they want to try to hit. They're the ones making the decisions. They say, this is what we want to do, and we say, this is how much you need to put in these accounts every single time you're paid. So it kind of looks like this. Mark's employer pays him $2,200 every 2 weeks. It goes into his individual checking account. Mark has to put $1,322 in the joint checking, $480 in the long-term savings, $124 in the discretionary, and $80 in the home maintenance and improvements. He is left with $226 every 2 weeks in his account, and that's what he's going to use to pay for gas, dining out, groceries, and his dry cleaning. Everything else is escrowed. They don't have to think about a thing. As long as Mark does that every single time he is paid, the budget's taken care of. It's done. They don't have to think about it. Now here's where those kind of boundaries come in, right? Mark only has $226 every 2 weeks. If he blows through $200 in 1 week, he's got $26 for the next week. He's going to learn real quick that he better make that money last for 2 weeks. Now, Amy's situation is a little different, but same structure. It's just different numbers. She doesn't do it every 2 weeks. She does it twice a month, right? She's left with $537 because she does more daily living expense. Does this all make sense to everybody? I don't know if this system will work for you. I think that it's a very effective system. I think that it does require you to roll up your sleeves. I think that, when you've gone through it and you start working it, it's a very freeing feeling. There's not a whole lot to worry about, and you've only got so much money. It's kind of hard to dig into these other accounts if husband and wife are both able to see them all, right? So phase 4, monitor and adjust. How's it working? Are our expenses changing? It's not real hard. If an expense changes, we just adjust, and the numbers change a little bit going forward. Income changes, expenses change. We might start this plan and say, hey, I don't know if we can make all the changes that we want to make up front. It's going to be a little too painful. let's ease into it, right? Let's start with this system, and let's see how it goes. And then let's adjust toward a more effective plan going forward. It's hard to make changes and change habits. We need to maintain accountability to an advisor or to your husband and wife. We need to maintain transparency. I think that's a key element. As I said, income and expenses can change. We need to have a system, whether it's this one or something like it, that you can implement on your own. I think that's very important. And ultimately, is this plan contributing to generosity and contentment? Is it relieving stress from your life? Are you able to save more and give more? Is that the direction we're going with this cash flow? And that's what we're really trying to help people with. And again, I'll just end with the people that do this, they really have a sense of relief, a sense of stress relief, kind of fall off their shoulders when they see. So this sample that I showed you was close to an actual case that we had with a younger couple, and they were 45 years old. And that $1,000 there of savings wasn't showing up as savings. It was just getting eaten up every month. It was just disappearing. They didn't know where it was going. We went through the budget. We went through all 4 phases. And we said, it appears to us as though you could be saving $1,000 a month. And if you do that for the next 20 years and you can earn 7% in your investments, you're going to have whatever the number was. I think it was like $700,000 for your retirement. And they were extremely motivated by that. They didn't realize that if they could stick to a budget and have a structure, that they will have an extra $700,000 at their retirement. And they were very motivated by that. So that's what it can do. It can provide a lot of financial health in the short term and the long term. So we are, as I said, happy to email the spreadsheet to you. We're happy to have you in the office and run through it. There's a lot of formulas and stuff in this spreadsheet. So my hunch is if you try to go through it, it won't work. There's kind of a lot of customizations that need to be done. But we are more than happy to go through this with anyone in this room that would like to do that. Okay, so with that being said, I think we're going to answer questions on some of this after we're all done. But right now we're going to call up Joe, and Joe's going to talk about life planning.
All right. Well, I'm not a Shaw, so I'll need to lower the mic a little bit. And my Italian roots are such that my height is an advantage. Now you can see the screen a little bit better. Scott mentioned before that I actually come to this industry with a counseling background, and I must say I feel like I have a very unexpected advantage when it comes to thinking about what in the world does counseling bring to the table when it comes to talking about money. And so occasionally folks will ask me, so Joe, what do you do? And sometimes I'll tell them I'm a marriage ref, or I'll tell them I'm in the fear and greed management business. And the fact is, those things aren't far from the truth when it comes to thinking about what it is that is entailed with handling this thing we call money. What I try to do in my role with the team is this. I want to bring perspective to say that this very important area of financial stewardship is a subset of life stewardship or life planning, right? As you see on the screen there, Scott referenced time, talents, and money last week. But I must say, answering this question of how can we empower you to live your best life possible, right, for God's glory by integrating your time, your talents, and your treasure. And as you heard Scott mention last week, we define treasure as all that you have that money can't buy and death can't take away. Very profound reality there, right? In recognizing that who's in your life will always be more valuable than what's in your life. Amen? So when it comes to thinking this through and helping our clients get a good handle on how they handle their money well, we want to think about having them see the big picture in life, right? And certainly we know by virtue of the faith put into us, perspective matters, right? When it comes to thinking through living a life on purpose. And so if we go to the next slide here, we'd like to talk with folks about learning from your past, right? And, you know, having grown up in the church, sometimes you get envious of the folks who have the seedy past, right? When it comes to thinking about their testimony and all that God has brought them from to where he has them now. But the fact of the matter is we all have a past, right? And we all have a responsibility to make the most of what that past has brought to the table, right? So we'd like to think about it in terms of defining moments, right? Whether by virtue of your good choices or lack thereof, right? We all can probably think back and reflect on a couple of moments in life that may have been forks in the road, right? Or may have had a real profound impact on who we are and why we do what we do, right? Or we think about influences, right? Who and or what have been the biggest influences shaping the way you think about life and how you act. Fortunately, as part of my counseling program through CCF in Glenside, they make a big emphasis on understanding the root dynamics in your heart and how they translate into what you actually do and why you do what you do, right? And with all due respect for the social sciences like psychology and sociology and so on, thankfully we have the Word of God giving us direction, right? In terms of really having clarity about the issues of the heart, right? And how the wellspring of the heart influences who we are today, right? So I could have chosen many verses to reflect on, but I found this one in Romans to be a great one. For whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through perseverance and the encouragement of the Scriptures, we might have hope, right? So we all have a responsibility to learn from our own lives, but boy, we have a testimony and a cloud of witnesses, if you will, that have gone before and give us plenty of cautionary tales, but also words of encouragement and inspiration, right, to live the way we ought to live, right? So that in mind, let's go to the next one. Living in the present, right? So how often do you think about the various hats you wear in life, right? Both inside and outside your home, outside your church, we're all juggling multiple hats, right, in terms of who we are as spouses, as siblings, as neighbors, as workers, and on, right? How often do you think about the idea of success and fulfillment juggling all those different roles, right? Easier said than done, but that's the calling before us, right? In terms of thinking through how do we go about striking some bit of balance in terms of where our time and energy goes, right? So proactively preparing for life transitions. One of our mentors in the business, Mitch Anthony, fellow believer out in the Midwest, he's identified over 60 life transitions that every one of us may face at some point in the course of this lifetime. 60. That's a lot of change, right? And we all probably have a pretty wide spectrum in this room as to how comfortable we are with change, right? So it begs the question, how prepared are you in your life to go with the flow and recognize that life doesn't always go on easy street and cruise control you may want it to, right? And so lastly, redefining success and significance. You may have heard Will Rogers' famous quote, "It takes a lifetime to build a good reputation, but a couple of minutes to lose it," right? That's a pretty daunting task, right? To think about how do you live day by day on purpose, right? And having our biblical models of success define who we are and not let the siren call of the world get us off task. In fact, I think about a great book a couple years ago called What's Best Next, written by a fellow believer, Matt Perman, talking about the difference between effectiveness versus efficiency, right? So I imagine going home tonight and having catching up with my wife when I get home and saying, sweetheart, I want to make sure this conversation we have about our day be as efficient as possible. Awkward. Those of you that aren't married in the room, you may not realize that might not be exactly the right way to go when it comes to having a meaningful conversation with my wife, right? Whereas effectiveness, right, and having clarity about what really matters, that's the task before us, right, as far as having discernment about where our time should go, right? So another verse for you here in the New Testament, and whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. God's glory, right, front and center. It's not a mile marker on our course of faith. It is the epicenter from which everything else revolves, right, on a daily, yearly, so on basis, right? So since Matt mentioned budget before, right, you're familiar with some semblance of a financial budget that Matt so skillfully walked through. You ever thought about a time budget? Right, so Scott last week mentioned how our checkbook is a value statement. Yes? Well, guess what? Our calendar does the same thing, right? And regardless of your financial means in the room tonight, have you ever stopped and realized we all have the same 168 hours a week to invest or spend, right? So Mitch Anthony, again, was kind enough to share this model to us to say, what would it look like if you took an inventory of where your time is going right now, right? And then compared it to what would an ideal model look like? And these categories can be adjusted, but the fact of the matter is, where you spend your time has a profound impact on carrying out the great commandment, right? Loving God, loving others, right? So want to mention one other quote here. Martin Luther was once asked, how do you think about how you spend your life? His response, there are 2 days that matter to me. This day and that day. And that day he's referencing to is the day when Jesus returns and claims his rightful rule over this world, right? So talk about beginning with the end in mind, right? Today has a direct connection with that day, right? So that's a good segue then to talking about leaving a lasting legacy, right? And living on purpose when it comes to thinking about what your future holds, right? So let's talk about retirement and work for a second. So quiz time. Did God bring work into the world before the fall in Genesis 3 or after the fall? Before the fall. Our work is full of thorns and thistles, right? But work is a pre-fall blessing, right? Now, so let's go to the second question. How about the concept of retirement? Is retirement mentioned in the Bible? Actually, there's one reference to retirement in the Bible, and John might appreciate this. Found in the book of Numbers, the Levitical priesthood was given the direction to say, once you've done a good service in your priesthood, around the age of 50, you may leave your post. Interestingly enough, the writer tells those priests that are retiring from that role to actually continue in a little bit of a consulting role, right? So consulting's happening way back in the Old Testament as well, right? But it does beg the question, right? And we're financial planners here, right? So we talk about retirement, and Matt mentioned it, right, as far as it being a worthy goal. But the question becomes how you think about work, right? So if you have a broader definition of work, right, that entails bringing value to other people and meaning to yourself, it may be different than what you're doing professionally right now. But brothers and sisters, you have work to do to the day you graduate. Right? So that's going to take on a very different dimension for every one of us in terms of thinking through how do we live a life where we hear, well done, good and faithful servant, right? By virtue of making the most of that time, talent, and treasure, right? So passing the 5 minutes after you die test, right? So have you ever stopped and thought about, boy, this decision I'm going to make with my time or my talents or my treasure right now, how much of it will it matter on the other side? Right? Now, that's very hard to do on a conscious basis all the time, but boy, it's instructive, right? And I don't know, you guys might be familiar with Randy Alcorn's great work on heaven, right? In terms of thinking through what does the Bible tell us in terms of what will it look like when heaven comes to earth and we co-rule with Christ, right? And what I really appreciated about the work he's done in that area is he mentions a lot more about the continuity of what we're preparing for today, and rather than the discontinuity of envisioning, with all due respect to the worship team, having endless worship happening just on the musical vein, right? There's work to be done even on the other side in terms of what it looks like to redeem that which God already has for us today, right? So in thinking through what that training looks like, right, studies have been done, and they're quite stark in terms of folks not taking the time to think about what they're retiring from, as much as what they're retiring to, than what they're retiring from. If your focus is on just leaving the 9 to 5, and you don't have a vision for living a life on purpose beyond, beware. That might be very hazardous to your health and those around you, right? So it's going to look different for everyone, right? And so we'll often mention in the office that we want to have great systems and structures in place. And Matt certainly walked you through a great one and a foundational one in the budget. But make no mistake, we plan in pencil, right? In the sense of God himself is the one who has the Sharpie, if you will, and speaking in terms of always and never, right? So we always want to have flexibility and adaptability in the way we think about the stewardship of our lives, right? But bottom line is this. In an age where more than ever, we're drowning in info, but we're starving for wisdom, we want to think about this area of financial stewardship as a very important subset of the stewardship of our entire lives, whereby we can wake up each day, right, with a renewed clarity and focus on the fact that we've got work to do. And it's a glorious calling. None of us are worthy of it. None of us are deserving of it. And yet, what a beautiful thing it is to know that we can be his ambassadors, bearing his fruit, right, and being a testament to his rightful lordship. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott to wrap us up.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Matt. You can see we have fun in our office. There's no shortage of challenging each other's minds and sharpening each other's minds. And we have a terrific administrator and office manager that keeps us on our toes as well. Those are really great thoughts. That's the first time I've heard Joe go through that, which was fabulous. And it's the first time I've heard Matt really carve through that budgeting concept. Can you imagine you go through the end of the year, and between saving and giving, you've just given away 25% of $100,000, 25 grand. You just did that. How that feels? There are some people that are thinking, I know, because we've seen it 1,000 times, I could never do that. That's a lie. That's a deception. Maybe you don't want to do it, but oh, you can do it. I will guarantee you can do it. But sometimes it needs help. Sometimes it needs a team. I'm thinking of the budgeting process. I can't stop smiling because one of the couples in here, we love working with them. They're just a great client couple to work with, and they do very well. And I remember them coming to us as we went through the budgeting cash flow part of the program, and he goes, hey, Scott, you missed a category. We did? Yep. It's called fork it over. fork it over. I said, what the heck is fork it over? He goes, that's when the kids and the teenagers and they're in college and hey, Dad, fork it over, fork it over. So we gave them a gift of this big silver fork at Christmas time. So, of course, you can customize the budgeting. Here's the big picture. That was very tough to see. The detail of Matt's envelope concept and system is very dynamic. It is very powerful. You just need a little willpower. You just need a little courage to say, "Ooh, what would that feel like?" Well, what does generosity like that, financial generosity, there's a lot of other types of generosity. What does that feel like? And saving. And the house needs repair. It's okay, honey. It's in our escrow budget, home improvement. We've been socking it away. That's why we've had less to buy clothes, go on vacations, have the bigger house, have the bigger car, which in reality, that person couldn't afford. Because they're not going to go through life without a house repair. They're not going to go through life without replacing the tires every 15, 18 months. That's a myth. That's a different world. I don't know what they're connected to. That's not reality. Just think of what Matt said. It was really a fascinating statement. He said, can you imagine the IRS just counting on you mailing in the money and running this $3.5 trillion budget in this country right now? They're having a hard time keeping the debt below 21 trillion right now, doing it the way they're doing it. Can you imagine how it would work if there wasn't payroll withholding for healthcare premiums and costs? Can you imagine how that would work? So just think simplistically toward escrowing all these other concepts, figuring out a simple system to get there. Maybe it's a little tough in the beginning. Maybe it is. It takes a little discipline. It's a little awkward. It's tough to get you. I get that. But the question is it worth it? Is it worth it where you can go through each day focused on big things, not money? Big things. You can allow, because you've learned not only to budget financially, you've learned to budget with your time. And when the interruption comes on the street and you don't know it, but that person really wants a friendly, sincere 2 minutes of your time to hear the care on their heart right then. You're not just saying, hey, sorry, Joe, I'll have to talk to you another time. I got to run to the next meeting. The interruption's budgeted in. Contentment, generosity, stewardship. We're going to wrap it up right now, and please don't feel obligated for this. Any of you that might have a couple questions that you think could benefit from a couple other ears hearing it and hearing the answer, we're going to end. And those that have childcare needs, go take care of that. Those that have to get home, go. Be sure to do that. Any of you that want to stay for just a couple minutes and have a couple questions or want to delve into a couple of these topics a little bit, we're just going to stay for 10 or 15 minutes because we got to wrap up at a reasonable time here. So we're very happy to do that. Second, here's the other offer. And this was never intended to be a solicitous presentation last week and tonight. Not at all. But we see horror shows financially. Or we don't see horror shows. We see people too embarrassed to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid. So they don't come in to a financial person's office. Or, I don't make enough money. I just can't do that. I don't deserve, I don't qualify. Look, we're the body of Christ here. If we've got a resource or a talent that can be shared with the body, we are willing to do it. So any of you that want to come to the office, I can see two distinct purposes that might be helpful to you. One is this whole concept of budget and cash flow and really get on a solid foundation. That could be one purpose. Second purpose, there's some really interesting things that have occurred in the tax law. 30% or so of the people that used to itemize won't itemize anymore because the standard deduction now, this year going forward, is such that it's anywhere from $24,000 to $26,500 is the standard deduction. And people go, oh, well, I'll just take that because I don't itemize enough between interest and charitable giving and the other things that you can itemize. So think about that. Let's take someone that's simply itemizing, and they're used to giving $8,000, $5,000, $10,000 a year, whatever it is. Because they're taking the standard deduction, are they getting any benefit for it, tax-wise? There's no leverage on it. You're getting the standard deduction. So we can help you and teach you turn those charitable dollars into tax-advantaged dollars. And it's not a big mystery. It's not a super complicated thing. It's called qualified charitable distributions. As you approach retirement, and certainly as you approach age 70, where there are required minimum distributions, they're called RMDs. You can take your RMD, and let's say the RMD was $5,000, and you're used to giving to a charity or to your church $5,000. Use the RMD and give it to the church, and you don't pay tax on it. So you not only get the $24,000 or $26,000 standard deduction, but now you don't pay tax on that chunk of money. It's very powerful. It's a very interesting concept and something that charitable nonprofit organizations should be highly in tune with right now. So whatever purpose, we're inviting you. You can come to our office, free visit. Not going to charge a penny. You don't owe us anything. You don't have to do business with us in the future. We're not saying that. If you feel obligated to give something, give it to the church. Put it in the offering plate and give that contribution to the church. If we can help you, we will. And if we can't, or if we ever can in the future or answer a question for you, don't hesitate, okay? So that's an offer that we're making to the church. We're going to break now and then gather for a couple minutes, and let me close us in prayer. Father, thank you for our time together tonight. You are such a gracious God. You are so good to us, and just you shower us with blessings we can't imagine and we know we don't deserve. But the greatest gift you've given us, the gift of salvation, well, how could we buy that? How can we earn that? How do we deserve that? Well, Lord, you've just blessed us with it. It's a gift, and we freely accept that gift, and we cherish that gift. Lord, thank you for your word and the principles in your word that we can apply to our lives, especially in this context tonight and last week on stewardship and financial responsibilities. Lord, we thank you for those lessons and those principles, and that we have a manual to follow. Lord, be with each of us as we travel home tonight. Give us safe travel. Thank you for our time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.